A listener production.
G'day, it's Rusty here, all set for part 2 of my podcast with Speedway great Jason Crump, who held it wide open for over 20 years and wowed them in stadiums all over Europe on the way to several world titles. If you haven't already, jump back to the library and give part 1 a listen, from following in the family footsteps to taking on the world. Insights on some legendary rivals and what it was like sharing the track with them. We kick off part 2 by looking back at the title that meant so much to him and why.
Yeah, I mean, the first world championship, Rusty, anybody, I believe anybody who wins a world championship, first of all, you've got to have some talent. You've got to have a bit of luck on your side, because you know there's never an unlucky world champion. But when you can finally put it all together and you can pick the big trophy up at the end of the year, then you know you've done it pretty bloody good, because the year before you may have done just one or two small mistakes and you maybe don't get to lift it. But you know, anybody who can win the world championship, I'm sure, says the first time they win it, it's a special, it's very special, and you don't forget that one.
Does it sort of fall into the same category then in a team's sense for you?
Yeah, I mean, our team, the Australian team at that point in the Speedway World Cup, I mean, we won the old format of the World Team Cup in '99 in the Czech Republic, and you know, the feeling we got from that, there was the 5 of us in the team, Lee, Ryan, Brian Sullivan, Todd Wiltshire, Jason Lyons, and myself. So Lee, Jason, and myself all grew up in Mildura. We're all from Mildura. So for the 3 of us to be there with Todd and Ryan and win the World Cup was pretty special. But the Speedway World Cup, as it got renamed in 2001, we went to Poland when Poland were a powerhouse team. We went to one of the most difficult tracks in Poland, and it came down to me in the last race against the Pole in the last race, and there was 5 in a race at that point. It was a regular track. It wasn't an extra big track. And man, I had Ricardson in the race as well, and it was a tight old first turn. And unfortunately for the Pole on the outside, he ended up on his backside and he was excluded. So we won the World Cup. And I think that 2001 Speedway World Cup also is a huge it was a huge moment in my career, because again, the same bunch of riders with Craig Boyce in the team, we beat the Poles in Poland, and it shouldn't have happened. It should not have happened. And it was, you know, Thomas Golub was at the peak of his career at that point, and you know, after the race, I beat Golub in. The stadium went completely crazy, and I'm being pelted with rocks and bottles and cans and anything and everything that any of the Polish fans could get. You know, I'm riding back to the pits after the race, and I'm just being hit with whatever could be found. So, yeah, it was a pretty wild. My wife and daughter, at the time. At the end of the meeting, we actually had to have about 10 police cars to drive us out of the stadium. We were on the floor in the van. We had two armored police sitting in the front that were driving it. We had police cars and vans in front beside, take us straight to our hotel. The police got us out of the vehicle, and took us into the hotel, and actually had riot squad out the front of the hotel room for the whole night.
Whoa. They love it there, but they are crazy passionate in that sense, aren't
they? Well, they are, and like I said, we, you know, there was no way we should have beaten Poland that night. But us 5 or 6 guys from Aussie, we pulled together and we got it done in Poland. And I think that's also, as I said, one of my biggest achievements. And to do it with a few of the other Aussie boys was pretty cool as well.
Awesome. Let's bounce through a couple of other things. You said in speedway terms, it's not uncommon for you to have bikes in different places. Mick has been able to keep, a bike from each of his championship winning years. You've kept a few as well. You probably don't have to go through all of them if you don't want to, but is there one or two that you have a fond attachment to, and if so, which ones are they?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have been able to keep stuff that I wanted. It's when you're a speedway rider, you're the team owner as well, so all the bikes are your own. There's not so much at this house, but my dad's got a lot of stuff at his house as well. So I've kept all of the bikes that I crossed that I used in the race that I won the world championship in, of course. And regretfully, at the time, I wasn't financial enough to be able to keep the bike I won the under-21 world championship on, but I wish I could. And if anybody out there knows where it is or who has it, I'd definitely like to know. But there's different things. You keep your helmets. I've got a whole room downstairs that's full of race suits and
some silverware trophies.
Yeah, stuff like that. But the things I like I like the FIM medals. Unfortunately, I have a few more silver than gold.
Cool. It's a brutal game. Most of the circuit races, bike races I've spoken to have all got injury tales. What about you over time? Some of the crashes and perhaps the injuries that were tough to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, it's, touch wood for me. In my main racing career, Rusty, I stayed away from injury, and I think that was obviously in that 10-year period of being in the top 3 in the world championship, that was a huge contributing factor to it, was to be able to stay out of trouble in the 80, 90 other meetings that you're doing every year, and make sure that you're on the start line for every major meeting. So there's things, I had 1 year I had to have knee surgery mid-season. Things like a shoulder dislocation or a broken collarbone are, to be honest, they're more of a pain in the ass than a they're not a career-ending problem, but they're a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Well, you can to an extent. I mean, the collarbone things, if you get it pinned or plated, it's normally a week or 10 days and you're good to go, and just different knocks. But it's racing. You're racing a motorbike. You can hurt yourself, and sometimes you do, unfortunately.
Yep. A couple of listener questions which we'll get to shortly, but can we turn left for a minute and have a little bit of fun? Firstly, you spoke at the Australian Motorsport Hall of Fame dinner a couple of years ago in relation to Mark Webber. You two are good mates. He and Anne have loved coming to speedway bike meetings in the UK. They really enjoy that. And I think you told a story about maybe you got home to his place one night and he'd forgotten his keys and you had to clamber up a pipe or something and break in. Just share that with us.
Yeah, we'd actually flown. I was at his place to go to Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, and I think, yeah, that's right. We got up on the Sunday morning to go to the circuit, and the weather was terrible, so we couldn't take the helicopter.
Okay.
So first thing in the morning, we've got a hell steer from Mark's house to the circuit. Luckily, it's only about half an hour away. So we jump in the car and off we go. So that's all good. We have the day there. Great race for him, because he strategically they outplayed Ferrari, and he ends up passing Alonso with 6 or 8 laps to go and wins the race. Well, the weather cleared by that stage, so the helicopter's all on to go home now. So that's great. But of course, the house keys are on the car key ring, who one of the assistants is going to drive home. So off we go in the helicopter and land at the house. Where's the keys? so he says to me, "Oh, what are you doing now then? He says something like that. And I said, well, my mechanics are here because I'm racing tomorrow. I'm at King's Lynn tomorrow, Speedway World Cup qualifying round. So what are we gonna do? So I said, well, I need my passport because I've got to straight up
in the house,
which is in the house, of course. So he clambers up he says to me, oh, you can climb up and get in through that window. And I said, I'm not doing that. I've got a race tomorrow. You've got a couple of weeks off. So he's up and in, and the alarm goes off, and they're obviously got everything programmed because it's Formula One weekend, so everybody knows he's away. So the alarm and security guards turn up and everything. So
I love it.
It was quite a funny story.
The British Grand Prix winner of the day, like a spider monkey climbing up the pole and the pipe and breaking into the house.
Yeah, that's right, breaking into his own house to get my bag with my passport in.
I love it. One of my good friends, you and I talked about this before starting the record today, is Trevor Long, who I worked with in radio an eternity ago. For listeners, he is the tech guy now on the Today Show on Channel 9. You call him Flipper. And this goes back to David Tapp's series 500 Days and memories of the 90s and driving around Australia. But you actually gave him that nickname, is that right?
I did give Trevor the nickname of Flipper because he was always flipping out at me because I'd done something wrong. And I'm guessing Trevor and I must be very similar ages because we were both kind of young men, and he was very hard-headed in doing what his boss Tappy was telling him to do, and I was doing what my boss myself was telling me to do, and it didn't always meet.
Classic.
But how good is it? I'm still in touch with Flipper now, and it's the memories that you get from motorsport are pretty amazing.
Fantastic, mate. Have you paused in all of this in a little bit later life, and just thought about the mark you made at GP level? And I don't just mean in result terms, about the way that it kind of, the impact that you had in helping to shape that aspect of the sport.
Well, I hope I did.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guys now I'm in communications with. I have a bit of communication with Ty Wolfenden and Bartosz Zmarzlik and a few of the other guys. And they do ask me a lot of questions, especially about the consistency I had for that period of time. And, like I said to them, there's no secret. It's just about planning and being prepared for it all. And, the way the guys ride now is I don't know if it's the way that the improvements in TV cameras and lighting, if it looks faster and closer now, or whether they actually are riding crazier than we ever rode. I'm not sure on that one, but I watch these guys now and the moves they pull, and some of the things you see Jason Doyle do in Grand Prix. I'm like, sheesh, I couldn't never have done that, but I guess maybe I did.
You've dabbled in a bit of commentary. Do you enjoy that side of it and imparting, sharing some of the knowledge that you bring to the table?
Yeah, it's great. I love it. It's interesting for me to watch because I can, from a commentating point of view, when you see a certain driver get himself into a position, what he's thinking and what his plan is, and you've got to convey that to the listener at home. And it's watching a speedway race for me, depending on who was in it, I could almost predict what was going to happen before it started. But
feel it, can't
you can. A lot of times you can. But no, I loved doing it. It was great fun, and to work with Tappy on a few of those Speedway Grand Prix was really great. And I'd love to see a Speedway Grand Prix come back to Aussie again. It was a great event in what was Etihad Stadium then. Unfortunately, we just didn't get enough people in.
Yeah. It was indeed very good. We'll go kindly on you. We'll be nice to you, but we've got some ripper questions from a few people from the industry and fans as well that have come through on social media, if you're okay. First one from Alex Cudlin, who says, if you could introduce and maybe mould one youngster from Australia, perhaps from dirt track, into the speedway world, is there anyone that you've got your eye on? Who would that be?
Damn, that's a good question, Alex. Fine motorcycle rider himself, Alex,
exactly.
yeah. And his brother Damien. I haven't been to a dirt track meeting for a long time, but as I said before, our junior speedway program in Australia, alongside dirt track, junior dirt tracking and kids racing motorcycles, it's not a surprise that we continually produce good high-level motorcyclists because of our junior program. And every time I do go to a dirt track meeting or a junior speedway meeting, I look at kids and I go, yep, that kid can, he can do it. But to give you a name would be unfair.
Okay, fair enough. Some have asked about whether you contemplated a move to four wheels. And there's one here from Scott Withers who says, why didn't the sprint car deal happen?
Well, I was very keen on sprint cars for a long time, but as with everything, you've got to know, you've got to know where your limits are. And as much as sprint car racing would have been great fun to do, at the time I was coming from a 25-year speedway career and couldn't actually face the thought of having to go and wash a sprint car or prepare a sprint car week in, week out. So it was probably more down to me than anything else at that point.
Cool. One from Mark Drury, who's a Pom but now lives on the Sunshine Coast. Fond memories, he says. He's got fond memories of Millennium Stadium. He says you were always a highlight reel rider for him. Who of your rivals did you look forward to the most in terms of going wheel to wheel, maybe having that on-track scrap with them? Yeah,
Ricardson, obviously. Had some fantastic battles with Tony over the years. You get to race with a lot of different riders, and you learn very quickly which ones you can trust with not meters or centimeters but millimeters. And there was a few I definitely didn't want to be engaged in proper combat, if you like, with. But then, guys like Tony and Thomas Golub, Lee Adams, guys with fantastic motorcycle control. Greg Hancock, you can race, you can be touching each other and race with. So any of those top bunch of guys was no problem. Mark Loram, English world champion, you could race with Mark, all day and all night and be running into each other, touching each other, and it was all fine.
Carl Phillips, did you ever consider sidecars?
Never.
Okay. Journalist Will Dale, casting your memory back here, what did you say to Chris Holder in 2012 to kind of calm him down after that tangle with Nicky Pedersen in the first start at that world title deciding semi-final? Can you remember that?
Yeah, clearly. Gate 1 was working exceptionally well that night. Chris had gate 1 in that race, and it's the biggest race of his life. Obviously, he's racing for the World Championship, and I could see what was happening, and I could see the mind games Nicky was starting to put into motion around what was going on. They were parked next to each other in the pits, and I could see everything that was happening. And my uncle and I, we were talking about, this is not a done deal yet for Chris. And somehow or another, Chris made a bit of a mess of the start off the inside gate, which was working very, very well. And Nicky got himself into a position. Chris, in my opinion, was quite fortunate to get away with not being disqualified in that race. So when it all came back to normal and they'd had their pushing and shoving and everything was kind of settled down a little bit, I grabbed hold of Chris and just took him away from that charged up moment there that happened at the gate on the track. And he said to me, what do I do? And I said, you drop the clutch when the tapes go up. Yeah, but where do I line up at the start? And I said, mate, wherever you would normally line up. You race here week in, week out. You know where the good spots are to line up. You know the reaction of your bike when you drop the clutch. Look at the dirt. Think about it for 20 seconds. You know exactly what your bike's going to do, where you line up. But when the tapes go, drop the clutch. And he looked at me like it was in that moment when you're under that much stress and you're hyped up and you want to win the World Championship, you only have to go back to the basics. Drop the clutch when the tapes go up. And he went out and did that and won the race and won the World Championship. So it was really no secret. There's nothing special about what I said to him. I said, just do that.
But when you wound up like that sometimes, breaking it down and reminding just to keep it simple.
Yeah, for sure. And I could see exactly what had been going on for the previous 15 minutes before that race. And we, like I said, my uncle and I, we knew pretty much exactly what was going to happen, because Nicky was a master of that. And I think that's why Nicky and I had a bit of, we had a bit of needle there for a while, because he knew that his mind games weren't going to affect me. And he very nearly stole himself a world championship off Chris Holder by playing those mind games. And, I was very proud to see Chris win that night, because, he was a kid that we helped out a bit when he came to Europe, and hugely, hugely talented rider. And, my theory was it's better to have an Australian world champion than a Dane again. So, but yeah, you're right, Rusty. In that moment, the basics are what you forget, but they're what you need to remember the most.
Did you know you can pick up second-hand speedway bikes for about $5,000? Imagine trying to get that thing registered without brakes.
Troy Byron, any involvement with the Speedway of Nations team if it runs this year?
Possibly not. I've never really been involved in the Australian Speedway of Nations team apart from when I rode in it. I'm involved with Speedway Great Britain, actually, in their coaching and youth development program. So the chance to work for the Australian team may be a bit difficult.
Okay. Any truth to a rumour floating around that you might enter the Australian Championship later this year?
I haven't even thought about it, but I would say it's very, very unlikely for me to do that. When you have to remember that the Australian Championship is a first stage for riders to qualify to get into the Grand Prix. Mm-hmm. I've got no Grand Prix ambition, and to put yourself in a meeting like that when guys are going for the next stage of the World Championship, it's probably not a place for a 45, 46-year-old.
A colleague, Michael Heaton, who's one of my TV producers, been around motorsport for some time, he wondered, and so did I, and we both hope that you're okay to talk about this. He pondered the impact of Lee Adams' crash and how that may have affected you. He was a fellow Aussie rider, as you've detailed in our chat here. He crashed while training for the Finke Desert Race in the Northern Territory in 2011, and very sadly, that was life-changing for him.
Yeah, look, the only thing I can really say about that is that for probably the last 2 or 3 years that we were racing with each other in Europe, every time I saw Lee, he's talking about Finke. Mm-hmm. I knew he was going to do it. We all knew he was going to do it. He'd been planning it. That was what he wanted to do when he finished racing. And obviously it was a shock, and it was obviously for him and his family an absolutely terrible outcome for it. But all you can say about it is that he was doing exactly what he wanted to do, and he was doing something that he'd planned on doing as soon as he stopped racing. If it would have been in January instead of July or June or July, whenever it is, if it was in January, he probably would have been doing it every year anyway. It's just the fact that it's in the middle of his work season in Europe. And honestly, if I would have heard one year that Lee had flown back to Aussie for a week to do Finke mid-season, I wouldn't have been surprised. He loves that stuff, So, it was a huge shock, and I obviously he's down south and we're up here, so I don't see him very often. But it's always good to catch up. We did a lot of stuff together, and obviously we were fierce rivals. A fantastic rider, and I say this with the utmost respect. When I look back at my rivals, Lee was a rival Monday to Friday, and of course he won Speedway Grand Prix, but honestly never felt that he was going to challenge me all season to be world champion. And I don't say that with anything other than respect. he could beat me whenever he wanted. But I always felt that I had a bit of an edge on him when it came to the world champion, to the Grand Prix especially.
Nice the way that you've covered that. In 2012, you called time. I think, if memory serves, a back injury was a part of that. How difficult was that decision? And give me a sense of maybe some of the emotions you grappled with in coming to terms with that.
Yeah, well, it actually wasn't a back injury for a start. It was a culmination of 3 or 4 other injuries. And I guess if I look back at it now, I guess that I probably possibly made a bit of an error in judgment of what my recovery was going to be. I came home and I got fixed up, and I was, in my mid-30s then. The injury side of things wasn't really, I guess it wasn't probably as bad as what I thought, but I had to go in and had surgery. Mick helped me out with his mate up here in Brisbane and got a few things fixed up. But the bottom line of it was that I probably lost my desire to be world champion. And I didn't understand at that point that I could race without having that desire to be world champion, because it's all I'd ever raced for. So, yeah, looking back, I probably could have, had the surgeries I needed, had the recovery I needed, and gone back and ridden in Europe without actually having to ride in the Grand Prix. The other thing was our kids, our daughter's, she's 21 now, so she was starting to go to high school. So I figured it's probably easier if I just knock it on the head for a while and let the kids go to school. They've both finished now, both finished year 12. They're pretty much doing what they want, and I'll go back and have a ride.
Well, let's talk about that. How much did you miss it? And you are back. You've thrown your leg over again.
Well, yeah, and I'm having a huge amount of fun. In 2012, I was worn out. Physically, I was worn out with the injuries that I had, and they weren't bad. They were just a couple of problems that were not allowing me to race at 100%. To be world champion, 100% is not good enough. You've got to be way above that. So I don't know. It just more mentally, those 10 years from 2001 were hard. I put a lot of pressure on my mind, on my body, on everything. So by the end of 2012, I actually wanted to have a sleep for a year. And then all of a sudden, a year turns into 2, 3, 4. And I'd still done a few meetings here. I'd still ridden a little bit here and there and still go okay some days, put a bit of weight on. But then I went back and had a ride in Perth last year on Australia Day weekend. And, there was a few guys over from the UK, that kind of go okay. And I managed to burn a few of them off. And next thing you know, I've got a contract. And I thought, maybe I should have a look at this. So I started in the gym with my mate Phil Young up here on the Gold Coast.
Who works with a number of supercars drivers and is very good.
Yeah. So I've known Phil for many years through MW, and it's one thing led to another, and next thing you know, I'm on a plane going back to England, and then this COVID rubbish kicks off, and I'm on a plane back home and didn't really get to race. But I think I've done 8 meetings in Australia this year and had a ball at all of them. Got my wrist fixed up again a couple of weeks ago, and I'm heading back to England in the next couple of weeks. So why not?
Why not?
I'm 45. I still want to win races that I go in, but I also get a lot of pleasure out of it because I don't have to win. I want to win, but I don't have to win, and that's a difference. 15 years ago, I had to win. Anything less than a win was a bad day. So now it's completely different. I turn up at the meetings here. I actually talk to people through the meeting, and it's kind of fun. Seth normally mechanics for me, and it's fun, mate. It's good.
Compartmentalised, terrific. You've brought up Seth, which is perfectly timed. So a 4th generation is going to go racing, is racing, I should say, which is incredible. But he's gone the circuit racing path. Tell us about, firstly, the conversation you had with him when he thought about doing that, how you felt about that, and getting on board and trying to help him on this mission.
Yeah, it was really funny. A couple of his mates were road racing a bit. Obviously, Ollie was having a ride, and Troy said, just bring him up and we'll put him on something. And I thought, no. Anyway, as it all works out, we ended up, we bought a bike off another friend of ours, and he ended up going up to a little track up here, just up the road where at the time you were able to ride. And the first day he's jumped on the bike, he didn't have leathers. He borrowed a set of Troy's leathers, and, just kind of thrown together like it is. And on the way home, he said, we got to get a better bike than this. I want to do a race. I want to do some racing. And it's how it starts. And it's really good because he's obviously under no pressure from us. He's wanted to do this himself. He had to go into go-karts for a while and didn't really, thought that's what he wanted to do, but kind of turned out that he didn't. If I'm honest, I thought that with the motorbikes, he'll ride for a year and then that'll be it. But he's pretty keen, and, he rides okay. And
in the UK too now for him.
Yeah, we took him last year to race in the junior super sport category over there in BSB, and he loved it, and he did okay. He didn't manage a race win, but very similar to me, got a lot of seconds and ended up second in the championship. So he did pretty decent, and goes up to the stock 600s this year with in the team run by Leon Haslam, actually. The Kawasaki junior team run by Leon, and mate, the future's in his hand. As any parent knows, when you're on the bike and the light goes green, then it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, who your dad is, who your mum is, who your uncle is. It's down to that person. And Seth deals with that quite well. Obviously, he gets spoken to by a lot of people at the races about his dad or his granddad or his great-grandfather even. But he seems to deal with it in his own way, and where he ends up, who knows? Time will tell.
Good stuff. Family time as well in that part of the journey for you in the early years. That's really cool. Although there is cachet around the name, it's never easy going, helping him in that journey, finding sponsorship, making the break, and as the sport has evolved, I'm sure there's some learnings for you even now in that regard.
Oh, mate, as I said earlier on in the talk, I'm not the most mechanical person in the world. So for me, stupid as it sounds, learning how to bleed a set of brakes, I never had to do that in my life. So I'm learning a lot more about that, but obviously the connections that we have in different forms of racing help. There's no gimmies in racing. No. So it all comes down to what you put in and what level of talent you got as to where you're going to end up, and we'll see where he goes. He loves it, he loves his racing, and at the moment he's just itching to get back to the UK and get practice, get testing, and it's exciting. It's as a parent, you're obviously you have concerns for safety, and motorbikes can bite, but at the end of it all, 30 years ago when I decided I was racing and I was going to Europe, short of my parents shackling me to a post somewhere out the back of the fruit block, I was going. So it's what he wants to do, and good luck to him with that.
The sport does, you and I love it. We're still immensely passionate about it, and the fact that Seth has embraced it and is keen on it as well, that's important. But globally, it does face a few challenges. Do you think about that in ways that we can ensure that young kids come through and love it as much as you did when you were a little tacker? Yeah,
I think that obviously the racing scene in Australia is very different to the racing scene in Europe. Australia is a great place to grow up, in the fact that there's bush pretty much bush everywhere you go unless you're living right in the middle of one of our major cities. But the thing with the racing here is you have people like Daryl Beattie, Gary McCoy. You can go out to Morgan Park on a race weekend and you can bump into Gary McCoy, Chris Vermeulen, Troy Bayliss. These are all guys that have raced at the highest level. It can't be forgotten that, that these guys are Superbike world champions, Superbike race winners, MotoGP race winners. These guys have raced at the highest level of motorcycling. So Australia is very accessible for kids to be put in front of people that can make things happen. Like Chris with Barry.
Yes.
Barry watches Chris and goes, bloody hell, we've got
to help this kid.
Yeah, for sure. And it's Australia's very much like that. Europe, it's a little bit tougher unless you're Spanish or Italian, but it's a great place to be here.
Let's round it out. In the garage, are there any little toys that you treat yourself to from an escape point of view? You talked about road bikes before, but is there anything along those lines that's a Jason Crump escape machine?
Nothing. Absolutely. I'm the most boring person ever, Rusty. No, I'll give you a laugh.
Yep.
I've never ever had a license to ride a motorbike on the road.
No way.
So I had this conversation with a good friend of mine, Paul Feeney, the other day.
Yeah.
He's just bought himself a new bike and he said, "Oh, come on, Crumpy, we got to go and get a bike and we'll start doing some riding." And I said, before I get a bike, Fiend, I've got to get a license. So
that would be all time watching you turn up to get the learner's permit or the.
Yeah, I've done a bit of rider coaching with the Queensland Police up at Norwell with Paul Morris, and obviously we had to do it all on the closed circuit because I don't have a license to ride on the road.
Awesome story to finish with. Congratulations, not just on the achievements, Jason, what you have done at world level. I really wish more broadly Australians knew that and perhaps appreciated that. But the other thing that stands out for me, mate, immense integrity. If you said yes, you were in. If you said no, you were a man of your word. Incredible commitment when you're on the bike. But I love the fact as well that you're still out there roaring around, having a bit of fun and doing it for the right reasons. Enjoy it. Yeah,
thanks, mate. It's I'm fortunate because I get to live a life that I want to live. I'm not held back by not being able to walk into Pacific Fair or Robina Town Centre and being mobbed by 1,000 people. So that's a good thing. I look at that as a positive. As far as the racing goes now, I've had more fun in the last 12 months of the few meetings I've done than I had in many, many years of racing at the highest level. So I'm really thankful that I have the opportunity to do that, and to be able to do it with the support of my family is really cool. To be able to be in the UK racing with Seth, both of us racing. I think the person who suffers the most is my wife, Melody. She's got a son and a husband racing as well. So she's probably going to have no fingernails left, but it's all good. Life's good. Wouldn't really want to change anything too much.
Great stuff. Enjoy.
Thanks.
Rusty's Garage is written and presented by me, Greg Rust. Series producer and editor is Alex Mitchell. Audio production by Darcy Thompson.
Listener.